Carleton.
Despite the fact that Canada has the second biggest housing bubble in the world, according to Bloomberg, and Vancouver and Toronto are the second and fifth most unaffordable housing markets on planet Earth, according to Demographia, the Liberal media and the Liberal government wants me to stop talking about housing inflation. Well, you know who doesn't want me to stop talking about it? Raj, who is an IT worker from Brampton who has to drive Uber in order to save up over 15 years to make a down payment on the average house in his community. Will the minister tell Raj and other Canadians, do we have a housing bubble, yes or no?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Mr. Speaker, we have to acknowledge that there has been a rapid and serious rise in the cost of housing across Canada, but we were wise to this fact long before the pandemic. Mr. Speaker, that's why we advanced a national housing strategy beginning 6 years ago, which didn't seem to get the support of the opposition parties at the time. We're going to continue to make the kinds of investments that has already seen 100,000 new units constructed, that has already seen 300,000 new units retrofitted. Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue to make the kinds of investments that will increase supply and reduce the costs so more Canadians like Raj can enter the housing market in Canada.
Honourable Member for Carleton.
No surprise that the finance minister is running away from her record on housing inflation. After all, since she took the job, prices are up by 20%. Since this government took office, they're up 58%, almost $300,000. They really started to rise when the government started to flood financial and mortgage markets with $400 billion of easy money that have raised not only house prices, but land prices. So with the second biggest housing bubble in the world, will the finance minister finally recognize Canada has a housing bubble? Yes or no?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once upon a time, the Conservatives liked to cast themselves as the party of sound economic management. But now they have a finance critic who, as one columnist recently put it, quote, has breezily bent facts past the breaking point, notably by asserting that Canada has run the largest budget deficit in the G20 and that Canada's inflation rate is far higher than all its peers except the U.S. Neither assertion is true, of course, so why should we listen to anything the member for Carleton has to say?
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
Well, the member loves to quote the Liberal state-funded media to defend herself. Well, let's do that. Let's do that. Let me quote the Globe and Mail. The Liberal government is asking Parliament to approve billions in new spending during a brief 4-hour sitting in Ottawa, but is facing questions because it has not released full accounting of how it spent more than $600 billion last year. Mr. Speaker, we don't know how this deficit ranks because they won't release the public accounts. All we know is that they have flooded the economy with over $500 billion of deficit spending, driving up, for example, housing prices to the second highest in the world. So I will go back to the same question. Does Canada have a housing bubble, yes or no?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, maybe the Conservatives' truth problem starts at the top. After all, a recent press conference by the Leader of the Opposition was littered with misleading statements about the economy. I won't get through all of them, but I'll start. He said Canada has the lowest growth. The truth? Q3 GDP numbers show our economy is growing faster than the US, UK, Japan, and Australia. He said Canada has the worst record on unemployment. The truth? We have recovered over 106% of jobs lost since the pandemic, compared to just 83% in the US. I could go on, Mr. Speaker, but I've run out of time.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
Well, I wish she would, because she loves to quote Liberal media commentators. One of the articles she quoted earlier actually talked about how she put manipulative media onto Twitter, making history as the first minister in Canadian history to be sanctioned by social media companies for misinformation online. So enough with the misinformation.